Network TV. I'm your host, Pastor Edna Fernandez. Welcome to the show For Such a Time as This, where the show is founded on Esther 4:14, where Esther 4:14, for if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And that is the name of the show, For Such a Time as This. Because each and every one of us are called into the kingdom for such a time as this. Not only prophetically, apostolically, this time, this season, this dispensation, these end time. He is raising up a remnant. He is raising up a mighty army to go to the front lines and to battle for God's people. Those that are willing to lay down their life, where Esther was an orphan, and she was raised by her uncle, Mordecai. They were Jews, and he raised her and prepared her for such a time as this. Just like we are to be in preparation, we are to be mindful of the plots of the enemy and how God overturned the plots of Haman to annihilate the Jews, how he overturned it. That decree was not to be broken. Once the decree was written and sent out, they could not change it. In the book of Esther, it speaks how God brought victory to his people, to his chosen, to his faithful. And Mordecai and Esther were able to be those two that saved the nation, that saved the Jews, that saved their people. Where Haman had an evil plot to destroy them, to annihilate them, because Mordecai would not bow to Haman. Well, because Mordecai was a man of God, and he was a righteous man. He was a man who followed the laws and decrees. They were Jews. They were Torah keepers. They were kosher eaters. I'm sure they kept the Sabbath and walked in the commandments as much as they could. They were chosen by God, not only as intercessors, as gatekeepers. They prayed and they fasted and they were separated and they were consecrated and they were on a mission to please God, not man. And they were not going to bow to any other gods, any other false gods. So this is part 3 of Purim 2024, which is Purim 5784 in the Hebraic, which is the year of the open door. So as I get back into the message, it's a short book, 1 through 9. It's only 9 chapters, but there's so much in it. And God brought victory, and God overturned it, and he used 2 people, just like he could use you and me, where they were just obedient to what God told them to do. And they were faithful in following through the orders that the Lord gave them, where they had to be in secrecy. They would talk through the gate, and they would send messages. One of the eunuchs would go and deliver the message to Mordecai, and Mordecai to Esther. So as I get back into the message, King Ahasuerus was looking to replace Queen Vashti, and he had a decree put out to bring all the women from 127 provinces to the palace where they were going to be groomed to replace Queen Vashti. So back to the message where after all these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti, what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's servant who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king, and let the king appoint officials to all the province of his kingdom, that they may gather all the beautiful young virgins from Shushan and Citadel into the women's quarters under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch custodian of the women, and let beautiful preparations be given them. Then let the young women who please the king be queen instead of Vashti." These things pleased the king, and he did so. I'm in Esther 2, I was reading 1, and I'm now in 5. In Shushan, the citadel, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, and the son of Jair, the son of Shimi, and the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives who had been captured in Jeconiah, king of Judah, who Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had brought up Hadassah. This is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful. When her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. 8. So it was when the king commanded, the decree were heard, and when many young women were gathered in Shushan, the citadel, under the custody of Haggai, that Esther was also taken to the king's palace, into the care of Haggai, the custody of the women. 9. Now the young women pleased him, and she obtained his favor. So she readily gave beauty preparations to her besides her allowance. Then 7 choice maid servants were provided for her from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maid servants to the best place in the house of the women. As 10, Esther 2:10. Esther had not revealed the people or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. So she had to be in secrecy. She couldn't blow her covers. She had to remain silent and keep that disclosed. And, 11. And every day Mordecai paced in front of the courts of the women's quarters to learn of Esther's welfare and what was happening to her. 12. Each young woman came to go to the king Ahasuerus after she had completed 12-month preparation according to the regulations for the women. For thus were the days of their preparation appointed, 6 months with oil, myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and preparations for beautifying women. 13. Thus prepared each young woman went to the king, and she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the women's quarters to the king's palace. 14. In the evening she went, and in the morning she returned to the second house of the women, and to the custody of Shashgaz, the king eunuchs, I couldn't pronounce that, who kept the concubines. She would not go to the king again unless the king delighted in her and called her by name. 15. Now when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her in as his daughter to go into the king. She requested nothing but what Haggai, the king's eunuchs, the custodian of the women, advised. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who saw her. 16. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into the royal palace in the 10th month, which in the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. 17. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight, more than all the virgins. So he had a royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. 18. Then the king made a great feast, the feast of Esther, for all the officials and the servants, and he proclaimed a holiday in the province and gave gifts according to the generosity of the kings. 19. When virgins were gathered together a second time, Mordecai sat within the king's gate. 20. Now Esther had not revealed her family or her people, just as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther obtained the commandment of Mordecai, and when she was brought up by him. In those days, 21. In those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gate, two of the king eunuchs, Bigthan and Theshresh, doorkeepers, became furious and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So the matter became known to Mordecai, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. 23. And when he was inquiring was made into the matter, it was confirmed that both were hanged on the gallows, and it was written in the book and in the chronicles of the presence of the king. Okay, so now I'm going to go a little bit back after reading. So this is what happened during that time when she was taken captive. But even though God was not mentioned, God's grace and God's favor was over Esther. And because God's grace and favor was over Esther, he had already anointed her. He had already appointed her. He had already had a divine mandate on her life for such a time as this. So all her life she was being prepared. It was only for that specific time that she was actually going to walk into it, that she was going to walk into her mandate. She was going to walk into her destiny to become queen, because God had already chosen her when he formed her in her mother's womb. God had already named her, from Hadassah, Myrtle, to Esther, Star. He had already preordained her for who she was gonna become through all that she went through. God had already appointed her for such a time as this. He had already ordained her and anointed her for the task, for the job. She was already set apart, because he set her apart from a child. He had already set her apart from her family, from her parents. She was already set apart. She walked in humility. She was humble. She was, her beauty is what captivated the king. It was the radiance of God's favor and grace and the anointing that he had over her life that he saw something different about her. I'm sure all the women that were there, that were being groomed and prepared, were all gorgeous women. I'm sure they were. All those continences of women, she was not only the only beautiful one. I'm sure there was even more beautiful women. But there was just something about Esther that was so profound, that she was different. And he saw that about her. Well, because she radiated, the light of God. She was anointed and appointed and chosen for such a time as this. Just like each and every one of you are also chosen for such a time as this. There's a calling on your life. There's a mandate on your life. God has specifically named you. He has chosen, He has ordained you for your calling, or He's going to anoint you for the task. He's going to give you the strategies. He's going to give you the instructions that He wants you to follow. We're all called. Many are called, but few are chosen. She answered the call. She said, if I perish, I perish. She was bold. She was courageous. And that's what I love about Esther. The whole story, the whole book of Esther, she was this amazing, godly woman. She was a Proverb 31 woman. And God chose her, just like He chose me and you. We all have a ministry. Okay, maybe mine is not to be the queen, of the embassy, or He crowned her with a beautiful crown. Could you imagine? He was so filthy wealthy to have a palace and be so prestige to rule and reign over all those 127 providences. So you could only imagine the wealth. But Esther was not looking to be in that position. She was just taken hostage. She was just taken by force. She was held captive. She wasn't looking for a position. She wasn't looking to be, number one. She was just there. She knew she was there for a plan and a purpose. She prepared herself. She separated herself from all the other women to bask in the presence of the Lord, to read her Bible, to pray, to intercede, to fast. I'm sure they had, they were in the palace, they had lavish meals. Esther chose to push her plate aside and fast for 3 days. It's called the Esther fast. No food, no water, nothing for 3 days. She told Mordecai to tell the people to pray and fast, no food, no water, for 3 days. And because of the prayer and fasting, they were able to break the decree and overturn it. And Esther found favor not only in God's eyes, but with the king. And he made her Queen Esther. So in this month of March, which is the month of Adar, according to the biblical calendar, we are celebrating Purim all this month, where tomorrow, Thursday, is Hang Haman Day, which is 1 week before Purim. Purim is actually March 24th. And every year I love to celebrate the victory of what God did to save His people in the book of Esther. We are to celebrate the same victories, because every enemy that has came against you, I declare and decree that God is going to overturn it. He's going to overrule it. He's going to reverse the curse. You are called for such a time as this, and you are called and chosen and appointed. And just like Queen Esther, He can use you. And He can use not only Esther, but Mordecai. I'm sure there's many Esthers out there. There's many Mordecais. I love the movie. I love this time and season and dispensation that we're in, because no matter what has been written of the enemy against your life, God is about to overturn it. He is about to do divine reversals. He is about to overturn every plot of the enemy in your life. So I just pray that you be encouraged, that every Haman would have his day. And I pray that you would celebrate the victories because they're coming, and breakthrough is coming. And just like God spared his people, he sent a deliverer, which is Yeshua HaMashiach. He sent a savior to save us. And just like he saved the Jewish people in Esther and Mordecai, he can do for you and your family. So keep trusting, keep believing, know that God has a plan and a purpose, and everything that was sent against you, that God is going to overturn. So I pray that you continue to watch as we continue in the episodes of Esther and Purim. May you have victory. May the Lord bless you and keep you. And may you continue watching part 4. Thank you.